Good morning, Secretariat. Can you kindly check where are the honorable members? Because it's almost 9 now.
Recording in progress.
I will do so, Chair. We currently have 6 on the platform. I'll just check in the group where are the members. Thank you.
How many do we need to start the meeting?
We can actually start the meeting, Chair, because 50 plus 1 is 6 members out of the 11. Thanks, Chair.
No, thank you very much. Can you kindly fly to the agenda? Thank you very much, honorable members. Welcome to our first ad hoc committee meeting. We have met as a MenCo to try and deal with the issues. And then we have an agenda before us today. Can I get the mover and the seconder for the agenda so that we can proceed with our meeting?
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, colleagues. My name is Slengwe Mkalipi. I move, Chair.
Thank you very much, honorable member. Seconders.
Morning, Chair. My name is Carol Mafahani. I'm second.
Thank you very much. The agenda has been seconded. Are there any apologies?
Yes, Chairperson, we've got one apology from Honorable Clark, who's unable to join our meeting due to ill health. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much.
And Chair, sorry.
Yes.
I've got an apology from Dr. Litchfield, who's got a family funeral, so she won't be able to join us. And Sihlengubane, who is going to join us a bit late.
No problem. Thank you very much. I think let's record the apologies. Just before we start the meeting, colleagues, I must just state that I'm traveling. I'm abroad. I might have connectivity problems. I would want to request Honorable Ramuloben, in an event I'm cut out to continue chairing the meeting, as she also sits in the MenCo and she's well vested with the issues that have been processed before. I will now hand over to Dr. Clark and the team to take us through the first item. Thank you very much. How much time do you need for this, Dr. Clark?
Chairperson, if I may.
Yes.
We've allocated 20 minutes for the 2 presentations from Dr. Clark and Ms. Tilana Harley. So they will be sharing the 20 minutes so that we can just quickly get the members to deliberate on the matters.
Okay.
That will be presenting. Also, just before Nata.
Yes. Sorry, we're losing you.
Parliament, and unfortunately she was not able to attend the last meeting where we introduced ourselves as a technical team. So if Chairperson would allow that she kindly introduce herself. Thank you, Chair.
That's fine. So we'll allow that to happen. We can proceed then. Thank you very much. And then Honorable Khumuto, when I disappear, can you kindly take over the meeting?
Noted, Chair, and good morning.
Good morning, honorable members. Good morning, Chair. My name is Nathalia Borchard, newly appointed section manager for committee section. I'm very excited to join the team at Parliament. I come from the Northern Cape Provincial Legislature, where I worked for various years, 29 years in various capacities, and I'm really excited to serve you. Yeah, thank you, sir.
Let's proceed with the presentation now.
Thank you for the introduction, Chairperson. Good morning, Honourable Chairperson and members, colleagues and everyone on the platform. When an ad hoc committee is appointed, it must debate on the mandate that will inform the committee's program for the duration of the committee's life. A starting point for this will be the scope that has been assigned to the ad hoc committee in terms of the national resolution that established the committee. In our case, that would be the National Assembly resolution of September 11, 2025. So the National Assembly resolution will identify the task that the committee must achieve. What is then necessary is a decision about how the committee will go about achieving that task. To support decision-making in that regard, committee support has prepared a policy development proposal that will inform the legislative development stage that will give effect to the National Assembly resolution. And it is that policy development proposal that I will present today, Chair and honourable members. So the motion to establish the ad hoc committee was tabled in the National Assembly and agreed to on 11 September 2025. The review of an amendment of the Parliamentary Villages Board Act will involve two sequential but interrelated stages, honourable chairperson and members. The first stage will be the policy development stage, and the second stage will be the legislative development stage. The purpose of this brief is to provide an overview of the proposed policy development stage. And in doing so, we will give a proposed timeline for that policy development stage as well. It will then conclude with recommendations for the ad hoc committee to consider. So the resolution of 11 of September starts by setting out the context that informs the establishment of the ad hoc committee. And that is a context where the Act does not have any provision that determines who qualifies for accommodation in parliamentary villages. And it's a context where, given a reading of the Act, it is reasonable to interpret that persons who qualify as residents do not include support staff of political parties, and it does not include support staff of presiding officers in Parliament. So within that context, the National Assembly resolution 4 sub A was taken, and that is where I speak about that being the starting point for the decision about how the committee will want to achieve this task. The task set for the ad hoc committee is as follows: to review and amend the Parliamentary Villages Board Act, amongst other, to enable support staff of political parties and support staff of other parliamentary office bearers, such as presiding officers, to be accommodated in parliamentary villages, and to review the composition and functions of the Parliamentary Villages Management Board to provide more representation for the administration of Parliament to ensure that the board is effective in the execution of its functions. Members will note here that in terms of the inner resolution, a deadline has been set for 31 March 2026 for the committee to report on its work. So as indicated, what's required next is a decision about how the committee will go about achieving those objectives or tasks. And in that decision-making, the committee may consider the proposal that the policy development stage must take the form of the below listed items, and that it will be focused on two things: a review of the category of persons who can or should qualify for accommodation in parliamentary villages, and a review of the composition and functions of the Parliamentary Villages Management Board. So the proposal is that the review will look at the following. Roman numeral 1, it will look at the South African framework that covers the existing laws, policy guidelines, practice notes that guide the provision of living accommodation to various groups within Parliament. And the purpose of that is so that then we avoid members approaching the work of an ad hoc committee in a vacuum. So the first part of the review is to ensure that the committee has a fundamental understanding of the entire framework applicable to the provision of living accommodation to various groups within Parliament. As part of the review, standard practice is also to do a comparative analysis. You look at what do other legislatures within South Africa or what do other parliaments internationally, how do they go about identifying the categories of persons who qualify for accommodation provided by a legislature? This also helps the committee to identify some of the motivations it will use when it gets to the point where it will have to provide legal services with a directive for how the Parliamentary Villages Board Act itself is to be amended. The suggestion is also that we need to undertake a needs analysis of key stakeholders, and this will include political parties, presiding officers, chief whips forum, and members' facilities, amongst others, in respect of categories of persons who should qualify, so that the committee can get a clear understanding of what the exact need is that needs to be addressed and in which manner would be the best way to do that. The last part of the review is proposed to be the assessing the composition and functioning, and this will include gaps and challenges of the Parliamentary Villages Board against best practices. So reports like the King Report on corporate governance gives us good practice. There's also select committees that have looked at Parliamentary Villages Board Act from an oversight perspective, and that will also inform the committee decision about what the current gaps and challenges are and how these can be addressed by increasing the representation of Parliament administration on the board. So having done the review, what the committee will then have prepared is a policy review report. And in that report, we will look at the work that the committee has done and identify the amendments that would be necessary to both the Parliamentary Villages Board Act, but also to any ancillary legislation. So that being legislation that is linked to and must be harmonized with the Parliamentary Villages Board Act. It might include the recommendation for the development of subordinate legislation in the form of regulations. The committee might want to say that while the Parliamentary Villages Board Management Act will be amended, it needs to be accompanied and read together with a policy and in setting out what the committee thinks should be included within that policy. So that could, for example, include the radius identifying the radius that determines whether someone, as included in a resolution, qualifies for living accommodation. The recommendation might also be the development of guidelines or frameworks to support existing policy or legislation. Should the committee adopt the above policy development proposals, the program will then will be as follows. We've already had the election of the chairperson. Today we're having the briefings on the policy development proposal and the committee bill proposal. The next meeting would be what I call the environmental scanning meeting to get that fundamental knowledge of living accommodation as a whole. We'll then have a briefing by the Department of Public Works on its assessment of the composition and functioning of parliamentary villages. I might take a step back, committee and chairperson, to say that the Department of Public Works will be a key stakeholder during this process. And for that reason, we are including them early on in the program in terms of this environmental scan presentation. And that will include what the powers and functions of the Minister of Public Works is in respect of parliamentary villages, including the provisions set out in Kiama. Also in November, we will then have feedback from the stakeholders on the needs analysis. Our last meeting in December will be a presentation on the national and international comparative analysis, which will then be followed by a workshop in January. And again, this will be attended by Department of Public Works and Infrastructure, the key stakeholders that have presented their stakeholder analysis. And at that workshop, the instruction for development of the specific provisions that must be included in the bill will take place. So members, what I've just presented is the policy development proposal stage. This will be followed by the legislative development stage. Immediately after I've done, Ms. Hallie Starkey will take the committee through the committee bill process, providing the detail that is captured here. It might be sufficient for now for me to say that the legislative development program will commence in February to May 2026. And it will conclude in August, or when the House is sitting again after the June-July constituency period has concluded. So having presented what the proposal is for inclusion in the policy development, we invite the committee to consider the following recommendations. The first recommendation is that the committee is to deliberate on the policy development proposal as part of that decision-making on how the committee wants to go about achieving its tasks. It's recommended that the committee accept the policy development proposal for implementation and note the timelines associated with the legislative development stage. So members will recall at the beginning I highlighted that in terms of the inner resolution, the deadline for the committee to report on its work is March 2026. Should the recommendations contained in the policy development proposal be accepted, it is recommended that the committee ought to, in terms of National Assembly Rule 253 sub 6, request the Speaker for an extension of the deadline of 31 March 2026 for the committee to report on its task, and recommend to the Speaker revised deadline of 31 August 2026 for the committee to report on its task. Thank you very much, Chairperson and honourable members.
Thank you very much. Is there a second presentation?
Yes, Chair. Ms. Hallie Starkey will take the committee through the committee bill process.
She may proceed.
Good morning. Good morning, Honourable Chair. Good morning, members. Honourable members, let me just share my screen. Thank you, Dr. Clark. My name is Tilana Hallie Starkey, and I will be taking the committee through the committee bill process. So, as a start, just to inform the committee what the committee derives its powers or its authority from the Constitution. There is Section 43A, 44(1), which provides that the National Legislative Authority Parliament. And then Section 55 then says that the Assembly, in exercising its legislative power, may initiate or prepare legislation. Section 73(2) speaks to the committees of the Assembly may introduce committee bills in the Assembly. So, honourable members, this is where you are established in terms of the Constitution. And just a little bit of background, in 2009, there was an independent panel that spoke to the powers of the Assembly and the powers of the Assembly initiating legislation. And then in terms of Parliament's draft strategic plan between 2024 to 2029, Parliament identified the impact of lawmaking, and for this reason, committees are therefore empowered to and encouraged, in fact, to initiate and prepare legislation, such as committee bills. So, just to give you an understanding of the difference between an executive bill versus a committee bill, as I said, there was an independent panel in 2009 that criticized Parliament for its poor record in introducing bills. And for that reason, we established a legislative drafting unit. And this is where I'm based. Myself and my colleague, Daksha Kasan, we are legislative drafters for Parliament. And in this way, we assist this committee. We will be assisting this committee in drafting the policy, the bill. The bill will be done. It's a committee-driven process, but as I said, we are there to assist the committee in the drafting. So it is, however, not possible to develop a committee bill. There are So there are following factors in favor of producing a committee bill, and there are factors in favor that are against drafting a committee bill. And these factors include policy development. So often there isn't enough policy, but in this regard, members, I'd like to inform you that Dr. Clark has explained with intricate detail in terms of how our policy will be developed. So I feel like this is not a factor that we should consider really or take into account, because we have a dedicated researcher who will assist us with policy development, and that is why the timeline has moved to May in terms of us drafting the actual bill, because policy is so essential when developing a bill. So like I said, there are a few factors that are in favor of drafting a committee bill, and this is when the bill is of a technical nature. And in this case, yes, the bill is of a technical nature, but we also believe that there should be a proper policy developed, and that is why Dr. Clark has explained to you the policy development process. So let's get into the nuts and bolts of it. What is the committee bill process? And as an overview, as members know, there is a first house and then there is a second house. So in the first house, the NA, policy will be developed, as Dr. Clark explained. The committee will then seek permission to develop the legislation. However, with our bill, we've already sought permission and there is a resolution. However, if the committee does agree to the program proposed, we will then extend the lifespan of this committee to properly develop policy and then draft the bill. The draft bill will be prepared, as I said, myself and my colleague Ms. Kassan will be assisting the committee. The bill is then advertised. There's an intention to introduce a call for comments, and then we will then do the tagging to establish whether the bill is a 74, 75 or 76 bill. A consultation process will then follow. It's entirely up to this committee whether the public hearings will happen. There needs to be input from the department and other stakeholders. And then if there are possible amendments, these will be considered, and then these may result in further consultations. The bill is then finalized, the bill is adopted, it's reported on, certified, which we do the certification, and then the JTM is consulted as a final time, and the bill is introduced and a second reading held. The estimated total time for this is 4 to 8 months, and this is just for the first house, and then it goes into the second house, which is the NCRP. So I thought I would just go through briefly. I know we don't have much time, but what are the rules, the National Assembly rules, that empower this committee to draft a bill, a committee bill? And I'm going to take you through the various stages and refer to the rules. So this little column that you're looking at now, honourable members, the first column deals with what the National Assembly rule is that empowers the activity. The second column is the activity itself, and then the third column deals with the estimated time frame for that activity. So the first thing is to fully develop policy. As I said, Dr. Clark has unpacked that in detail, and you can establish then that there is some time that takes to develop policy and report to the National Assembly. The second part that I'm dealing with in this activity or this table is the memorandum to adopt. But like I said, we've already sought permission. This committee has been established. And then just a little bit about policy. Policy is essential to develop legislation. A drafter of legislation needs policy, and that's why it's a very crucial part of the process. And this is also where I'd like to point out, if a bill involves the department, it's important for the department to play a significant role. But also, if the bill concerns parliamentary business, it's also equally important to have Parliament play a specific role or significant role in the step of policy development. So if we look at NA Rule 2732, 3 and 4, this is just to detail that the Speaker will table the memorandum and the Assembly will be given permission. And this has been established already, and we've already done this. And then 2741A of the National Assembly rules provides that a committee must prepare a draft bill. And this is where we will assist you, and we will develop the bill and develop it based on the policy that we receive. 2741B then talks about the JTM process, and the joint tagging making process is basically where us as CLSO, we will draft the tagging memo, and that will go to the JTM to decide. And this is based on a number of factors, whether the bill will be a 74 or a 75. 2761B then talks about a notice of intention to introduce. So this normally takes a week. Us as the legal services, we will draft a notice of intention to introduce, and this will be then put in the Government Gazette together with a copy of the bill and an explanatory summary. And committee support, which we have in this committee, will assist us with advertising the bill and obviously to gain public input. 2762 talks about the bill being published and an invitation to interested people, and 275A and B talks about interested persons must give at least 3 weeks after the publication to comment. Also, that the relevant department or organ of state must be given sufficient opportunity to make submissions to the committee. And this estimated time frame is usually 3 weeks. Then we go on to Rule 2743, which talks to the committee must report to the House when a bill is published. Section 59(1)A of the Constitution unpacks meaningful opportunities for public participation. Now, I'd like to pause here, honourable members, to state that this is the reason why we ask for comments. If you look at Doctors for Life unpacks the essential of public participation. And like I said, public participation can take many different forms. It is up to the committee to decide what that looks like, but there are factors that are in legislation that determine what public participation should look like. There aren't any rules per se, but there are factors. So the factors that we would look at is, what does Parliament say about public participation? And we have our own framework that we look at when we look at public participation. Then the nature and importance of the legislation. What is the legislation saying? Who is it affecting? How important is the legislation? That will impact who we go to for public comments. The impact of the legislation, like I said, how impactful is this legislation to the public? And any time constraints. Is it urgency? Does this legislation have to be promulgated by a certain time? And then the efficiency of the lawmaking process, that's also a time factor. So all in all, we estimate that public participation will take 3 weeks. That's the maximum. But depending on the number of submissions received, because legal services, together with the committee support, consider the public submissions, and legal services will then respond to the legal implications. National Assembly Rule 275D talks about the committee may make amendments to the draft bill. So this is the deliberation process. So once we've received these comments and once we've now deliberated on the bill, the committee itself will deliberate on the bill. And there might be possible other amendments. We might receive input from the public that says, tweak this section, tweak that section. And if there is a material amendment to the bill, if we consider case laws such as Truworths versus Minister of DTI and South African Veterinarian Association, those judgments do provide us with some guidance regarding that we need to re-advertise if there is a material amendment. So if the bill then in committees, we will then re-advertise. And this we also would add to the time frame of when we finish the committee bill process. Let's move on to National Assembly Rule 275C. The committee must consult the JTM for final classification of the bill, and this is usually 2 weeks. If we look at 279(4), the bill must be certified by the Chief Parliamentary Advisor. So this is what we do. We will then do a certification of the bill to see that it is in line with the Constitution and existing legislation and is properly drafted in the form of style. This usually takes a day, maximum 2 weeks. National Assembly Rule 279, 1 and 3. The committee introduces the bill, submitting a copy thereof and a supporting memorandum to Speaker. This usually takes 1 week. Once again, we assist the committee with this, and then the committee then will introduce the bill. National Assembly Rule 283, within the findings of the joint tagging mechanism as per National Assembly Rule 275C, is tabled with the bill when introduced, and this takes about 1 day. So then this slide, honourable members, talks to National Assembly Rule 286, which is the process in the committee. And this also talks about whether the committee may approve or reject a bill, and whether or present with its report an amended bill or redraft a bill, provided the case of a redraft of the subject of the bill has not been extended without the permission of the Assembly. So amendments that flow from the facilitation of public involvement, the deliberation of committees, and oversight exercises and responses to the department. So what I'm trying to say is back to what I said earlier with the materiality of the amendment, you'd have to consider 286 of the National Assembly rules. And this latter part of the slide talks to what I just expressed now, honourable members, the judgments of True Words and South African Veterinarian Association. So lastly, if you look at National Assembly Rule 2821 and 292B, the bill does not have to have a first reading. It's a bit different, a committee bill process. Instead, it is placed on the order paper for a second reading. At least 3 Assembly working days must elapse since the bill was introduced before a second reading, and this is usually 1 week. So in total, the estimated time would be 4 to 8 months in the first house. We can truncate that process, and which we have advised, and Dr. Clark has explained that we estimate that we might conclude in June. The legislative drafting process is 18 to 15 weeks, but we have 2 advisors in this committee to assist the committee to obtain its goal. Facilitating of public involvement, the maximum is 6 weeks, and the minimum 5. And then the House procedure will take 3 weeks. So that just gives you a snapshot understanding of how much time a committee bill process will take in the first House. If you look at the second House, as you know, a bill is then transmitted to the referred committee. The committee deliberates for 7 to 9 weeks. It reports to the second House, and then it's consideration by the second House, depending on the program of the House. Honourable members, thank you for your time. And if there are any questions, please let me know. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the presentation. The chairperson has left the session. Nola, I think you will assist with hands that would want to engage or get clarity on the 2 presentations that we have received. Members, if you have hands that seeks, if you have clarities that you want to pose. I see the hand of Honorable Ngubane. You can come in, perhaps others will follow after.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. I think we appreciate the presentation. Chair, my concerns firstly are general. First and foremost, I think, Chair, there is a mistake that has been happening. We need to have these presentations and documents shared up front before we are being called in the meeting so that we are able to contribute constructively in the meeting. And then, because we're just seeing the presentation now in the meeting, so it will be difficult for us to engage because we haven't received it and prepared enough with the given document. That's the first thing. And then the second thing, is there a way we can get a snapshot from the lady that presented of what currently do we have as this committee as a first point or a first base point of departure to say this is currently what it's in existence in terms of parliamentary villages amendment that we're going to do. this is what we have now. These are things that we are having, and these are the problems that have been created, and we want to envisage this future going forward so that we know when we start to engage here and we know where do we come from, what do we have currently, and where are we going to with this. And as well, I see the lady is mentioning the periods that exist when you formulate the bill, public hearings and all those stuff. When we're speaking about public hearings here, are we talking about public hearings of villages, residents, people who are staying on villages, and as well, I heard you spoke about state organs which are impacted related to this. Will this? According to me, I don't see this take long as compared to other normal bills that Parliament always formulate that affects the public. Mainly, according to me, this affects the members of Parliament, staff, and researchers and all people. But I stand to be corrected, and I believe that the public hearings and the inputs will be far much shorter compared to the other bills that are being done by Parliament, who sometimes take years or so to formulate. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Honorable Ngubane. There is no other hand? Okay, can the team come in to give clarity to the questions and clarities that Honorable Ngubane would have raised?
Honorable Chair, can I attempt to respond to Honorable Ngubane?
Yes, Telena, you can start.
Sure. Honorable Ngubane mentioned public participation. So as I thought I was clear when I said that public participation can take many forms, that there isn't a real legislative guideline as to what that looks like. But we have a lot of precedent in judgments that provide us with that sort of an understanding of what public participation can look like. So in this case, because it's the Parliamentary Villages Board Amendment Act, I would think that the Act, it does apply to the public, but not really. The real affected people would be the people living in parliamentary villages. But because all bills need to be advertised and the work of Parliament has to be made public in terms of the Constitution, we have to advertise the bill. Now, I don't foresee that I would propose, but it's entirely up to the committee, that formal public hearings need to be taken place. But that is entirely, once again, up to the committee. The committee can advertise the bill, call for public submissions. The committee can invite people to present to the committee, present written submissions to the committee. It's entirely up to the committee. There are no fixed rules, but there are guidelines in terms of what public participation looks like. And then I think there was another question about what do we have currently in front of us. So we do have a resolution from the NA establishing this committee and establishing that this committee will amend the Parliamentary Villages Board Act. And there are two really broad scale policy ideas, if you could say. There is amend what is currently the mischief in the Act that has been raised, that what the resolution says that we should do, or there is let's look at it broadly. And I think that's what Dr. Clark has sort of alluded to, is that we need to take some time to establish a proper policy in order to find out what is the mischief of this Act, what can be improved in this Act, and so that we don't do a haphazard amendment and then a year from now other issues arise. So I don't know if Dr. Clark wants to come in here and just reiterate the understanding why the policy will take some time to develop.
Can I proceed, Chair?
Yes, Dr. Clark.
Thank you, Chair. In respect of public participation, I just wanted to add, in addition to what Ms. Hallie-Starkey said, The Parliament in its values commits to be a transparent legislation, and with the use of public funds. In this case, if the bills are affected, if the resolutions of the NA is affected, the use of public funds in this case to make accommodation for the staff of political parties and office bearers to be accommodated. I think that in itself warrants public participation beyond just the parliamentarians that are living in the villages at the moment, and beyond just the Minister of Public Works, for example. So in practice, what that would look like, members, is we advertise the bill for written submissions, and then we will, in the advert, say, should you wish to make an oral submission to the committee, please indicate it. Please indicate to that effect. We will then be, as committee staff, be in a position to tell members, look, there's been significant public interest in this bill. We think a public hearing, either online, we can even say where the significant interest comes from in particular provinces, but the call for public submission will give us an indication of what the level of interest is in the bill. And that is also one of the factors Ms. Haley-Starkley spoke about when you consider the nature of public participation you want to enter into. In respect to what we have now, it's exactly because we want to get a very clear understanding of what we have now, members, that our proposal is that the very next meeting the committee has is a briefing on the legislative framework as it is now, who is accommodated within parliamentary villages now, for what reason, what accommodation is necessary. And in that very first meeting, we'll ask the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure to indicate in their assessment what is the current gaps and what is the current gaps, both from a policy and from a legislative perspective, to give that committee the overall picture of what do we have before us currently when it comes to the parliamentary villages and the functioning of the Parliamentary Villages Board. Thank you, Honourable Chair and members.
Thank you so much, Dr. Clark. Any other hands, members, that still seeks clarity or has questions? I don't see any hands. And Honourable Ngubane, were your questions or clarities responded to accordingly?
Yes, Chair, they were responded to. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Okay, thank you so much. I think on the public participation process, we'll have to then, when we come to that component, be able to design it as the committee on a method of how we're going to oversee that process. Either do the public hearings normally, or we invite key stakeholders to make submissions and presentation to that process. So I don't think we should worry ourselves at this stage, but when we enter into that particular stage, as the committee will then take that decision as the ad hoc on a method or approach on how we're going to do the public hearings. Colleagues, they were a part of the presentation that was made, especially by Dr. Clark. It is that they are recommending, there's a recommendation that if we agree as this committee, we should send to the Speaker to request an extension because of our deadline in terms of this ad hoc, which has been given to us is the 31st of March next year. And based on the amount of work that still needs to happen, and you have in one of the documents that we have, it clearly even indicates the process, the timelines to it. So it is therefore recommended that we write to the Speaker and ask for a revised deadline of the 31st of August for the committee to conclude its work and send the report to the Speaker so that it can then be taken to the House. So those are part of the recommendations. Thank you so much. I'm not sure it's Nola or Dr. Clark who is flighting this. So over to you, members. If you are in agreement, with the recommendation and that it's proposed we consider, and if we are agree, then be sent to the Speaker in writing, requesting that extension.
I'm in support, Chair. I think we can do that, yeah.
Thank you so much, Honorable Ngubane. There's no contrary view on it or contrary hand on it. So it is then in agreement. We then agree as this committee that would seek a revised deadline from the Speaker to the 31st of August. Nola, can you kindly flag the agenda so that we can then proceed to the next item? Is there any other matter that we need to agree on, Telena, on your part?
Nothing from my side, Chairperson.
Okay, thank you so much. We'll then move to item, is it 5, consideration and adoption of minutes. Nola?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I was just going to come in where you posed the question, because I think the other matter that the committee needs to agree to and rather adopt is an issue of the actual program, draft program that has been proposed by the technical team. So we need to also have it on record that the committee adopts the program as it is. Thank you, Chair.
Kindly flight it.
Annika, can you please flight it from your side, from your presentation?
Members, there is the program that will speak in detail on how we're going to carry out our work, ultimately to the revised date of the 31st. And if you would go through it, I think the documents have been sent, even though they were not sent in time for us to be able to go through them. But I know now Nola has resent them. So that is the proposed program that we should follow as the committee ultimately to August when we complete our task. Can I have a mover that formally adopts it?
Chair, can I just get a clarity? Honorable Khalifi?